Life is not guaranteed. Nothing in life is. But I mean, life itself. You take it for granted, you go to bed at night, you close your eyes, you expect to wake up the next day. That's how it's supposed to be. If you're a wrestling fan, you are almost desensitized at this point to hearing about death. Hear about it far too often. And there's been so many of them over the years. There's been so many this year alone. This week alone. I was ready to come on here and say a few words about Danny Hodge and Kevin Green. People die every year. But 2020 just feels more cruel than most. And even with all of that awfulness, I was stunned when I heard that Brodie Lee had passed away at 41 years old. I'm still stunned. It doesn't compute. That's not supposed to happen. That doesn't feel real. He just celebrated his birthday a week and a half ago. I didn't even know he was sick. Very few people did. Sounds like only his family and maybe a small inner circle of people knew what was going on. I, like a lot of you, thought he was out with an injury. I was asking some of those same questions over the weeks. Hey, where's Brodie Lee? And, it never really occurred to me that if he was out with a minor injury, he could still be on TV. Or he could be filming comedy sketches for Being the Elite. He could be doing stuff with the Dark Order. Or he would be tweeting. He hadn't tweeted since October 7th. That was the night that he lost the TNT title in that dog collar match on TV to Cody. Never occurred to me that he could be sick. And why would it? Why would anybody think that? The man was 41 years old. And he was in the middle of what I'm sure he looked at as this big prime run of his career. Doing what made him happy and hopeful for, bigger and better things in 2021. He wasn't the youngest guy in the wrestling business anymore, but there was no reason to believe that anything like this could ever happen. Look at him in the dog collar match the last time we saw him. He looked fine outside of all the blood when the match was over. Never in a million years would I have expected that would be his final match. And what a last match it was. It was violent, it was bloody, and it is one hell of a final match. His wife, Amanda, posted this on Instagram. Said, "My best friend died today. I never wanted to write those words. My heart is broken. The world saw him as the amazing Brodie Lee, formerly known as Luke Harper, but he was my best friend, my husband, and the greatest father you could ever meet. No words can express the love I feel or how broken I am right now. He passed surrounded by loved ones after a hard-fought battle with a non-COVID-related lung issue. The Mayo Clinic is literally the best team of doctors and nurses in the world who surrounded me with constant love. On top of that, I cannot express my love and admiration for the way that AEW has treated not only my husband, but myself and my kids. I've been surrounded by so much love and incredible people. I can't tag them all, but they know who they are, and I don't think they will ever know how thankful I am for them." Mike Johnson reports that he was hospitalized at the Mayo Clinic in Jacksonville for some time, for many, many weeks, with the entire, and again, I don't know that the entire locker room knew what was going on, but certainly members of the AEW roster and brain trust that did know were basically staying silent. They upheld this oath to say nothing publicly, to give no indication of what was going on, to not talk about him at all, to give the family the privacy that they needed or that maybe they wanted. And that is all we know so far. I'm not going to speculate beyond that. That is all that we know. 41 years old. I'm not much younger than he was. And it just makes you stop and think how quickly things can turn on a dime. You had two little boys that, by every account, every message, every story, every tweet, every Instagram post, every video that I saw of him, he absolutely adored. Brodie and Nolan. Go watch any interview or go listen to any podcast that he appeared on. He always talks about his kids. They were the center of his universe. They were his world. He told a story on the AEW Unrestricted podcast last month. He was just on there last month. I don't know when that was filmed, but it was after, I believe, he lost the TNT title. So it's a recent interview. He was on their podcast last month talking about winning the TNT title. And when he did, sneaking the title belt when he got home into his son's bed. I guess his son was sleeping. And he snuck the title into his bed so that when he woke up the next morning, he would wake up and he would find the championship. And then he could see his reaction. It is very unfair. It is very unfair that his sons now have to grow up without their dad. And they're going to hear all these wonderful stories, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people looking after them and looking after that family, but it's not the same. It's not the same. And that is the real tragedy in all this. I mean, we could talk about wrestling and his matches and his career, and I will, but that is inconsequential when it comes to the impact that this is going to have on his family. All of this other stuff is just trivial by comparison. On the most recent episode of Dark, and this is just amazing stuff. Obviously, there were people who knew what was going on. They knew how serious it was. They were doing everything they could to try to accommodate the family. And on the most recent episode of Dark, the Dark Order, the faction that he led, had a 6-man tag team match. And at one point during the match, the action spills outside. And one of the Dark Order members walks over to this young boy in the front row who has a mask on, a Dark Order mask, a creeper mask. And it wasn't a high five, but he sort of locked hands with him. It's kind of like a high five gesture. And the kid's got a chain around his neck. He's got a kendo stick in his hand. And the announcers referred to him as -1. The newest member of the Dark Order, -1. And that was Brodie's son. That was Brodie's son, Brodie Jr., under a mask. There was also a segment at the end of the tapings that had Kenny Omega losing the AEW World title to Brodie. You know, Brodie pinned him, and they had Justin Roberts announce him as the new AEW World Champion. I don't know if they filmed it just to show Huber, in Brodie Lee, in the hospital, or if they did it just to give his son a special moment. That's a very cool thing for them to do. Obviously, they knew how dire the situation was, and that was a very nice gesture on their part. But not only did he love his kids like crazy, he was a great dad. He was a huge animal lover. He had dogs, he had cats, he had chickens. And one of the many cool stories that I saw, and there were many, there were so many. I mean, to say that he was trending last night would be an understatement. My whole timeline was nothing but Brodie Lee, which is pretty cool. And it goes to show you the impression that he made on so many different people in AEW, out of AEW, WWE, everywhere. But one of the many cool stories that I read was from a road producer for WWE who worked with him quite a bit, Dustin Wallace. And he said, I had the fortunate opportunity to document several day-in-the-life pieces with Harper. I met his son, his wife, and his chickens through these shoots. His sense of humor is something everyone knew. When he debuted with the Wyatt family in 2013, Harper had one request. He said, I want to do a video with dogs. And for over a year, he would jokingly come up to me and ask if the dogs were here to film with him. And they never were. And finally, one day, I was so happy to be able to finally answer, yes, we've got dogs. When I told him that we had a dog shoot, he said that he was too busy. He had other things to do, and that he was too busy. And he saw the defeat in my face and started laughing uncontrollably, and said that he was just joking, and he raced over to meet the dogs. And he says he never forgot that, and I will never forget him. I lost track of all the messages from people all around the wrestling business. WWE issued a statement. Pretty much every major promotion did. Obviously, AEW, Impact, all put out official statements. Tons of WWE stars that he worked with, people he was friendly with, have shared memories and left messages and stories. But Bray Wyatt's, and that was the one I was really waiting on. Because obviously they worked very closely with one another, became very good friends. And he posted something on Instagram that was the most, outside of what his wife wrote, the most heartbreaking thing of all. Because you can feel it. Just reading the words on a screen, you could feel the pain in his voice. Said, you were my best friend, my brother, my partner, my Terry Gordy. We changed this whole game because we refused to do it any way but our way. We were always at our best when we were a team. I think we both knew it. We fought like brothers because we were. I'm so goddamn pissed. This isn't how it was supposed to be. It was supposed to be us, fat, bald, and useless, running Wyatt family spots in high school gyms in our 70s. Where do we go now? What do I do knowing I'll never hear your condescending sarcasm as I am riding high? I miss you so fucking much already. I would do anything just to live through our worst moments again. Can't believe you're gone. I'm so sorry, brother. You will always be a part of me, whether I like it or not. Without you, everything is different, and I hope Amanda truly knows that I'm here, not just saying it because I love them too. I will make sure your son knows the incredible man you were. Not the legends people will tell, but the real you that very few people got to see. I promise I'll put him over clean in dark matches when he's old enough, just like I promised. I'm hurting so bad. I wish I had the chance to say goodbye. But then again, it is Saturday, and you know what that means. Save me a seat next to you wherever you are. That's where I belong. I'll be there when it's my time. Goodbye forever, Brodie. I love you. The Wyatt family. The Wyatt family was his big break. And one of my favorite WWE matches of the last decade. And really one of the best six-man tag team matches I've ever seen in the history of that company. Is that first meeting at Elimination Chamber in 2014 between the Wyatt family and The Shield. The crowd was chanting, "This is awesome," before they even touched. Before they even touched. They had a standoff and the crowd was on their feet chanting, "This is awesome." And the next 20 plus minutes is everything I love about pro wrestling. From the build-up to the beginning of the match, right down to the finish. An outstanding match. And their follow-up match that they had, I think it was on Raw a few weeks later, also an excellent match. But the magic of that Elimination Chamber match, that very first meeting in front of that crowd on that night, is something special that you you just can't replicate. You just can't. Another match from that year that does not get as much attention. But I was thinking back, to his best matches in WWE. And I thought of the Battleground match, which I sometimes forget about. But the Battleground match that he and Eric Rowan had against the Usos that same year. It was 2 out of 3 falls for the tag team titles. That was an excellent match. Later that year, he had the chance to be more than just a sidekick to Bray Wyatt, and he won the Intercontinental title. So he could be more than just a tag team guy. Now, he only had the title for, I think it was 20-something days. It was less than a month. He didn't hold it for very long before he dropped it to Dolph Ziggler in that brutal TLC match. And that was another excellent match that he was part of that year. So really, if you look at 2014 in particular, for Luke Harper, it's a pretty damn good year. When you look at the body of work as a member of the Wyatt family that he was able to be part of, or that he was able to put together, 2014 may have been his best year in that company. And not because he got worse, or because with age he slowed down, but it just seemed like that was the year where he really had a chance to go out there and just open a lot of eyes and show what he could do, for a bigger guy. And he was a big guy. He wasn't 7 feet tall, but he was a bigger guy by comparison to a lot of other people on that roster. And very agile for a big guy. He was able to do things that, a lot of guys his size, especially many years ago, either wouldn't try to do or couldn't do. And I'm not sure we ever truly really got to see what he was fully capable of in that company. But what we got to see from him, especially that year, was some great stuff that absolutely, if you're looking to go back and spend a few minutes watching old Luke Harper matches, that's the year I would target. And I would go back and check out some of those bouts. But that ladder match with Dolph was insane. Those guys went out there and they just destroyed each other. He almost broke his arm in that match. He was bleeding from the arm. Dolph was bleeding. Those guys stole the show at TLC that night. He looked like a man who was on a mission. He looked like he was a man with something to prove. And, even in defeat, even dropping the title that night, he was hopeful that that could be the start of something for him heading into the new year. And it was frustrating, years later after he had left the company, and he did a whole bunch of interviews. He was on Talk Is Jericho, and, hearing him tell these stories and talk about the frustrations that he had coming out of that ladder match with Dolph, because it just all fell apart because he was told, well, we don't have anything for you. Or we're just going to, have you keep doing Wyatt family stuff. All he wanted to do was break out on his own and forge his own path. All he wanted was a chance. The angle where Randy Orton had infiltrated the Wyatt family, which was probably end of 2016, going into the beginning of 2017. Harper was the one who didn't trust Orton. He was very distrustful of Randy Orton, the way he would glance over at him. He was the guy who would, you could picture telling Bray, look, I don't trust this guy. It was actually a great story that they crafted. And Harper, he told this story as well. He said he told the writers, flat out, told the writers, look, the way that you're crafting this story, I'm going to be the one who gets over. And they said, no. We have it written a certain way. He said, okay, but I'm telling you, I'm the one. I'm going to start getting big reactions, and I'm going to be the one who starts getting over here, even though it really was not designed for that purpose. He was not the one they were trying to get over. They were trying to get over Randy and Bray and that whole story, and he was just supposed to be sort of a bit player that helped facilitate that, but he was smart enough to look at it and go, you know what? I see the writing on the wall here. I'm just telling you guys. And of course, he was right, and they were wrong. And the crowds really started to become more invested in Luke Harper. even though that was not designed to be what, the outcome of that was. But that really was the point, right? They didn't want him to get over. He wasn't the focus. He wasn't the focal point. It was the other two. I maintain to this day that it would have turned out much better. That WrestleMania match in Orlando should have been a triple threat match. And I'm normally not a fan of doing the multi-man stuff for the title at WrestleMania. If ever there was a time that story was so good that should have been the end result. And it's a shame he never got that moment. But he got out of there eventually, and he landed in AEW. And he was all set to debut earlier this year as the Exalted One, the leader of the Dark Order. And it was going to be in his hometown. He was a New York boy. He was from Rochester, New York, and that's where Dynamite, I think March 18th, was scheduled to be. And what a homecoming it would have been for him. He would have gotten a hero's welcome. The hometown boy returns home. And then COVID changed all of that. In fact, I think that was the very first pandemic show where there were no fans in attendance. But for the first time, he really had a chance to be a leader and not a follower. And he even admitted, he said, it's exciting, but it's scary. Because for years I talked about how I want the opportunity. I just give me the chance, just give me the ball. And he felt it wasn't given to him. They didn't believe in him. And you could always lean on that as an excuse. Well, the reason it didn't work out for me is because they didn't give me the chance, right? Oh, it's their fault, not my fault. And he said, well, now in AEW, you have the creative freedom to or at least more than he had previously. He goes, I can't make any excuses anymore. He goes, this is either going to work or it's not. I'm going to succeed or I'm going to fail. And I can't blame the promoter. I can't blame the company. I have nobody to blame but myself. But he was grateful to finally have, at 40 years old, the chance to go out there and just show what it is that he can really do. But I thought he had a damn good brawl with Jon Moxley at Double or Nothing back in May for the AEW title. He was thrust into that match. Probably would not have happened that quickly were it not for COVID. I believe that was probably one of the changes made to the card. It felt like it was coming a little too quickly. Didn't feel like he really had much of a shot, so I wouldn't say there was a lot of drama. But those two went out there and they beat the hell out of each other, and they had what I thought was a very worthy, very physical world title match on that pay-per-view. And one of the most memorable matches of the pandemic era was the night that he squashed Cody to win the TNT title in about 3 minutes. It was just such a dominant, lopsided beating, and I think I even said at the time, the only thing I could really compare it to, although, on a smaller level, it wasn't a pay-per-view main event or anything, but SummerSlam back in 2014, when Brock Lesnar thoroughly embarrassed and destroyed John Cena in a way that caught a lot of people by surprise. This caught a lot of people by surprise too, and it was, I think a lot of people looked at that and said, okay, this is Brodie Lee. This guy went in there, he was like an animal. Went in there, he tore this guy limb from limb, beat him fair and square in the middle for the championship. The whole ending to that episode of Dynamite, everything that followed the match, laying out all the members of the Rhodes family, standing dominant over them, him and the Dark Order, that was the best the Dark Order ever looked, and that is still to this day one of the best finishes to an episode of Dynamite that they've ever done. That was one of the best things they did all year. It really, I think in a lot of ways, was the highlight of his AEW run. And, people also forget, as far as his run, it wasn't very long as TNT champion. It wasn't that long. But it was fairly successful. He had a couple of TV matches on Dynamite that did very well in the ratings, even to my surprise. I think there was a match he had, a title defense against Orange Cassidy. But there was a match with Dustin Rhodes that on paper, it didn't necessarily feel like or sound like a main event, but it was positioned as the main event, and that was, a big title match on TV, and I believe it was the Dustin match that did over 1 million viewers, which was pretty surprising. But I would imagine for him, when he probably found that out, probably put a big smile on his face. His last match was the dog collar match with Cody back in October. They even brought in Greg Valentine, right, a veteran of maybe the most classic dog collar match in wrestling history, to be in the building that night to watch the match. And he and Cody went out there and they both bled and they both used, the chain, and they definitely took advantage of the stipulation. That was a very violent affair. Can't say that it didn't live up to the stipulation. But what his future may have held, we'll never know. His AEW contract gave him the freedom to work dates for New Japan if he wanted to. And to listen to him speak, he very much wanted to work for New Japan. The only thing that was stopping him was the pandemic and the fact that there was no travel at that time between the two countries. It was going to be very difficult to make that happen. He probably would have ended up there at some point in the next year. At the end of the day, he seemed like a good, decent man who loved his family and made everybody that he worked with laugh. Not a bad word said. Everybody sharing stories and photos. I mean, you could tell how much they loved this guy. They loved his company. They loved working with him. They loved sharing a locker room with him. They loved being around him. If there was some kind of tragedy or some kind of health issue or some kind of anything negative going on in their lives or with their careers, or they got released or whatever the case may be, he was on the phone to them, sometimes for hours at a time. He was that person. You could probably count those people on one hand that you have in your life, and he was one of those people. I'm happy that he got the chance to break out on his own and have the success that he had. He deserved more time on this earth, to watch his sons grow up and to watch Brodie Jr. follow in his footsteps. He's already doing wrestling tournaments. I'm sure he'll probably end up in the wrestling business following his father's path. And if they grow up to be the kind of man that he was, from the sounds of it and all of the stories and all of the accounts from the people who knew him, then the world will be a better place. Tomorrow isn't promised, so make the most of today. Rest in peace, Jon Huber.